Hi friends, does the Bible teach that 1,000 of our years is just one day with God? I hear this a lot from Christians these days, but it's not what the Bible teaches. In this video, we'll read and analyze the scriptures and see what God really says and why it's deeper and more beautiful. So there's this idea floating around that the Bible teaches this formula. 1,000 human years equals one of God's days. Have you heard this? It's used like a mathematical equation to interpret some Bible passages. And one of the oldest teachings is that since the earth was created in 6 days, then the creation will last for 6,000 years, 1,000 years for each day. And since God rested on the 7th day after the 6,000, there will be a 1,000-year millennial utopia of rest for mankind and all creation. I've also heard someone say, Jesus has been gone for 2,000 years, but that's only 2 days for God. So that's how it's used. But if we want to know if this is really taught, we have to read the entire text in context. The first place we read is Psalm 90, a psalm of praise written by Moses. Verse 2. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting you are God. You return man to dust and say, Return, O children of man, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. The psalm is glorifying God and expressing wonder that He is eternal. From everlasting to everlasting means for all of eternity past and into eternity future, God exists. Notice it says you are God in the present tense, though it's speaking of time past, present, and future. It goes on to say, 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past. Now, in your sight, by that it means from God's perspective. He's pointing out what is different about how God sees time from how we do. And also notice how he says yesterday, when it is past. This is a very important qualification. The comparison is only valid about 1,000 years and yesterday when they are past. The point is, because God is eternal, He can remember 1,000 years in the past in the same way we remember yesterday when it is past. We could easily remember what happened yesterday, but we can't remember 1,000 years ago. And even the recorded history we have from then is sketchy and incomplete. But notice what this passage does not say. It doesn't say, 1,000 of our years are but one of your days. Why are they misquoting it when that's not what it actually says? So this was never meant to be a mathematical formula, 1,000 man years equals one God day. After all, this is poetry. It's a corporate worship song, not a teaching on mathematics. And notice this part that you almost never hear. Not only is 1,000 years as yesterday when it is past, but it says, or as a watch in the night. Now the Israelites had 3 night watches, so each one is about 4 hours long. So if you want to take this as a math formula, not only is 1,000 years equal to 1 day, but it's also equal to 4 hours. But that makes no sense. I never hear anyone say that. Why do they ignore this part of the verse? Well, I think it's because they're not interested in what God is saying, but in what they can make God say. What this last part means is that God can remember what happened 1,000 years ago as easily as you or I remember what happened last night. Last night is even closer to us than yesterday, so it intensifies the meaning in the poetry. Not just God remembers the previous millennium like we remember it 24 hours ago, but He remembers it like we remember early this morning. Psalm 90 is saying, because God is eternal, from His perspective, 1,000 years ago and yesterday are both fully known to Him at the same time. Now, theologians who have studied God's relationship to time come to realize that God is outside time. Think about this. In the beginning, God created the universe, but where was He before that? He wasn't in the universe because there was no universe. Even now, He's still outside the universe because when He created it, He didn't get trapped in it. It didn't limit Him in any way. Each of us is confined to a single point in space, but God is not confined by the space He created. Now, in the same way, when God created time, He did it along with the universe. Before there was a creation, there was no time as we know it. God was outside time and is still outside of it because when He created time, He didn't become trapped by it or limited by it. You and I can only experience this moment in time. The past becomes a fuzzy memory, and the future is unknown to us. But God is aware of all time all at once. Imagine time as a long path that wanders through the woods. The people walking on the path can only see the small part they're on. But God is like a man in a high tower who can see the entire path of time all at once. We can barely remember the part of time's path that our ancestors walked 1,000 years ago, but we can remember where we walked yesterday. God, however, can see both just as easily and at the same time, looking down from the high tower of eternity. 1,000 years in his sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. But even this illustration is limited because not only can God see it all, he can act at any point in time. Just as God is omnipresent and able to act at any point in space, he is also omnitemporal and able to act at any point in time. I think some people imagine there are clocks in heaven where God is, and these clocks just run at a different speed than ours. But there are no clocks in heaven. God is a timeless being. And are there chairs in heaven? Well, no. God is spirit, an immaterial being. There's no physical throne chair because immaterial beings don't sit in chairs. The throne of God is a symbol to help us understand his kingship. Now let's quickly look at 2 Peter 3:8, where he quotes from Psalm 90. But do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. Peter's with the Lord is saying the same thing as Psalm 90's in your sight. This is from God's perspective. Peter not only repeats that 1,000 years and a day are all the same to a timeless God, but he goes in the other direction. A day and 1,000 years are all the same too. And in quoting the poetry of the psalm, he's kept some of the poetry by saying it twice. But more than that, it's a chiasm. The second half is a mirror image of the first. If you still don't know what a chiasm is, you need to watch my video. They're all over the Bible. Now what happens if someone tries to take this verse in 2 Peter as a math formula? Half the verse would say 1,000 of our years are equal to one of God's days, but the other half would say one of our days is equal to 1,000 of God's years. Now those can't both be true. It's nonsense. It wasn't meant as a formula. Why is it I never hear these people quoting the whole verse? They take it out of context and only quote the second half. So I've heard them say Jesus has been gone for 2,000 years, but that's only 2 days for God. It seems like a long time to us, but it's just a blip for God. Well, by the same logic, since it has been 2,000 years for us, and each year is 365 and a quarter days, if each of those days is 1,000 of God's years, then Jesus has been gone for over 700 million years for God. Do you see the absurdity of trying to make a math formula from this? It just wasn't meant that way. Peter is saying nothing different. He's paraphrasing Psalm 90. From the high tower of eternity, God sees 1,000 years and 1 day in the same view. The true teaching of Scripture is actually more beautiful than a math equation. God is a timeless being. As Isaiah 57 says, he inhabits eternity. From everlasting past to everlasting future, he is present tense. And remember what Jesus said to the Pharisees? Before Abraham was, I am present tense. Jesus is also everlasting God, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, and being the same yesterday, today, and forever. God's timelessness is a refuge for us. He's never in a hurry, never late, but always has perfect timing. We get impatient, he doesn't. And he remembers all his promises he made in the distant past and knows he will fulfill them all in our future. Your past may be a fuzzy memory to you, but God remembers every prayer you've prayed, every tear you've shed, and all your joy as if it's happening right now. He knows the end from the beginning, so he can tell us what's coming. And we can have the assurance that Jesus will return to finish our salvation, to resurrect all the believing dead, and to take us home in perfection. God's timelessness glorifies him. Much more than if he had clocks in heaven that all run slow. Much more than if he gave us math equations that contradict themselves. Everything in this world changes and decays, but God is the eternal constant, an immovable, unchanging rock we can anchor our lives to in the midst of the storm. So let us worship God, the timeless one, and be careful how we use his words in Scripture. Thanks for watching. God bless you all.